Chapter 5. Learning Social Skills and How to Deal with Shyness. By the time I went on my first real date as a college senior, it felt less like a rite of passage and more like a miracle. I had spent years watching others fall in love, flirt, and fumble their way into relationships, while I stood on the outside, silent and studying them like specimens. Everything changed when I began working with my counselor. But let me be clear, this wasn't casual support or general guidance. This was intensive rehabilitation for someone whose capacity for human connection had been stunted by years of emotional neglect and selective mutism. The clinical approach to connection. My counselor treated social skills like any other learnable competency. He gave me articles, handouts, actual tools. We broke down conversations into component parts: how to ask questions that invited response, how to read nonverbal cues, how to keep dialogue alive beyond one-word replies. I took this seriously because I had to. My social life, my sense of worth, my hope for love and connection, everything depended on learning these skills that seemed to come naturally to others. The 3-column technique became my constant companion. In my backpack, I always carried a pad of paper and pen. At first, it felt clinical and awkward, but over time, it became my anchor. Column 1, the thought: she won't want to talk to me. I'm going to embarrass myself. I'm too weird, too quiet, too boring. Column 2, the distortion: predicting the future, mind reading, all or nothing thinking. Column 3, the challenge: what's the evidence this thought is true? Have people actually said I'm boring? Aren't there times I've made someone laugh? I filled page after page with these exercises. In classrooms, at frat parties, walking across campus, I was constantly battling the thoughts in my brain. Each interaction required strategy and courage. Here's what I learned that changed everything. Shyness wasn't just a personality trait. It was a survival strategy, one I had outgrown but didn't know how to abandon. Every time I avoided a conversation, I felt fleeting relief, like dodging a bullet. But afterward came the self-loathing, the shame, the deeper invisibility. The 3-column technique gave me something stronger than avoidance: agency. For the first time, I could do something about my anxiety besides disappear. The therapy group laboratory. My counselor also ran a group specifically for socially anxious students. That group became a laboratory for human connection. We role-played awkward scenarios, rehearsed how to speak up, how to assert ourselves without aggression. I was surprised by how many brilliant Georgia Tech students felt the same way I did: awkward, unsure, invisible. Engineers and computer scientists who could solve complex equations but couldn't figure out how to ask someone to study together. It gave me strange hope. Maybe I wasn't broken. Maybe I was just inexperienced. What we practiced in group: how to enter conversations already in progress, how to disagree without becoming combative, how to express interests without seeming desperate, how to handle rejection gracefully, how to recognize and respond to social cues. We also worked on something called graduated exposure, deliberately putting ourselves in increasingly challenging social situations. For me, this meant week 1, make eye contact with 3 strangers. Week 2, ask a question in class. Week 3, initiate conversation with a classmate. Week 4, join a study group. Each step built on the previous one, creating evidence that I could handle social interaction without catastrophe, always the extra person. Despite all the skills I was developing, I still couldn't cross certain thresholds. I never met girls directly at parties or in the cafeteria. The women I got to know were friends of friends, or already connected to people I trusted deeply. I was always the extra person, the third wheel, the safe guy. My friend Thomas trusted me completely around his girlfriend Jolie. That trust wasn't misplaced, I never crossed boundaries, but I couldn't help noticing how easily they connected, how gracefully they touched each other's arms, how they laughed without hesitation. After Thomas graduated, I grew closer to Jolie as a friend. We'd eat lunch together, talk about life. I never made a move because that wasn't what our connection was about, but her presence reminded me that I could connect, that I wasn't completely invisible. What I understand now is that these safe friendships were crucial to my development. They provided evidence that I was capable of meaningful connection without the terror of romantic rejection. They built my social confidence in low-stakes environments, dancing lessons, and missed opportunities. At Thomas and Jolie's wedding, I was the best man, a role that came with a terrifying expectation of dancing. I'd never danced. Not really. The idea filled me with a phobic-level dread that went beyond normal self-consciousness. Jolie asked her maid of honor, Mary, to teach me. Mary was stunning and patient, guiding me through basic steps, while I tried not to focus on how attractive she was. For a moment, I wondered if I should ask her out, but the old patterns held. She was probably out of my league, probably had better options. Then, at the post-wedding party, something unprecedented happened. Another woman, Marlisa, was clearly interested in me. Jolie had to point it out because I literally couldn't recognize the signs. Seriously, Bruce, she's been trying to get your attention all night. This was entirely new territory. I had trained myself for years not to notice interest, not to hope. It was easier to assume no one was attracted to me than to risk the disappointment of being wrong. But once I looked, really looked, I saw it. The way Marlisa kept glancing in my direction, the way she positioned herself nearby, even how she protectively moved a dog away when it was bothering me. The first real invitation. Marlisa invited me to an Easter play at her church where she had a role. This wasn't subtle or ambiguous. This was a clear invitation from someone who was interested. I said yes, feeling for the first time that someone had chosen me. After the performance, we walked together under the night sky. The air was comfortable. Stars were out. I was thinking about how much she seemed to care about me, which was still difficult to process. Given my religious conservatism at the time, a gentle kiss seemed appropriate and expected. I leaned in slowly, hesitantly. She turned her head away. Shame and silence. The rejection wasn't cruel or harsh, but it was clear. This wasn't the moment I thought it was. I froze, didn't say a word, just stood there humiliated. My face went hot. My thoughts collapsed inward. I read it wrong. How could I be so stupid? It wasn't just about the kiss. It was about everything I'd been working toward, every CBT column I'd filled, every group session I'd endured, every hopeful thought I'd barely let myself believe. It all felt undone. I didn't lash out or push or even ask for explanation. I just disappeared back into the silence I knew so well. That was the last time I saw her. Just like Michelle, I let embarrassment override everything else. I couldn't understand yet that rejection doesn't equal personal failure, that social missteps are part of learning, not evidence of fundamental unworthiness. What I needed then, what took years more therapy to understand, was that my reaction to rejection revealed the deeper wound. It wasn't really about being turned down for a kiss. It was about a nervous system that had learned early that being unwanted meant being in danger. That rejection confirmed every terrible thing I'd been taught to believe about myself. The path to genuine connection would require not just social skills, but healing the attachment wounds that made every risk feel existential, every no feel like abandonment. But I was learning, slowly, imperfectly, but learning nonetheless. The transformation I could finally see. By my senior year, I was amazed by how much I had changed. The person who had been left alone on that August day during orientation, before classes even began, could never have imagined things could change so much. I was choosing in once impossible to imagine new career direction, drawn to psychology by the very transformation I was experiencing. Psychology was amazing. Look what it had done for me. I walked across campus with my head up, scanning for friends to greet rather than hiding from eye contact. I hung out in groups of 6 to 10 people, going to amusement parks and movies, fully included in the social fabric I had once observed from the outside. I had many friends, real friends who sought out my company. With the women I knew, I might have been the safe friend rather than a romantic prospect, but I spent time alone with them, was trusted completely by their boyfriends, and even accompanied one friend to the all-girls college nearby because I was confident enough to handle that social setting. At the post office, I laughed easily with coworkers like Mike. I spoke up with managers. I had opinions, made jokes, contributed to conversations. In small groups, I was no longer the silent observer, but an active participant. I realized I was actually an extrovert who had been trapped by anxiety and poor social skills. Yes, larger groups still intimidated me. Speaking in class or at full fraternity gatherings remained out of reach. I tried during English classes to share thoughts, but couldn't quite break through that barrier. But the contrast with who I had been was staggering. I was no longer drowning in the invisibility that had defined my high school years. I had learned to connect in meaningful ways. I could imagine becoming a therapist myself, helping others the way I had been helped. The foundation was solid now for a future that included love, partnership, and the family I had always wanted. That transformation happened through 5 years of deliberate, sustained effort to heal and grow, and I could see it, feel it, celebrate it. A note to readers. If you've made it this far, you might recognize something of yourself in these pages. Maybe you've sat in therapy sessions wondering if CBT worksheets could really change anything fundamental about who you are. Maybe you've avoided situations that trigger anxiety, telling yourself it's easier than risking rejection or embarrassment. Maybe you've watched others connect effortlessly while feeling like you're missing some essential manual for human interaction. What I want you to know is this: the transformation I experienced wasn't magic, and it wasn't quick. 5 years of weekly therapy, countless 3-column worksheets, role-playing in group sessions, and gradual exposure to increasingly challenging social situations. It was tedious sometimes. It felt clinical. There were moments I wondered if I was trying to engineer my way into being human. But it worked, not because the techniques were sophisticated, but because I was finally learning skills that most people absorb naturally through secure early relationships. For those of us with attachment wounds or complex trauma, these skills don't come automatically. They have to be learned deliberately, practiced repeatedly, and reinforced consistently. The college environment helped enormously. I had friends who treated me well, a fraternity that provided belonging, however imperfect, and access to excellent mental health services. I was surrounded by other brilliant students who were also figuring out how to be adults, which normalized the learning process. If any of this resonates with you, I invite you to reread this chapter after you've finished the book. See if you can identify the specific elements that might apply to your own journey. The path forward isn't always clear when you're in the middle of it, but it becomes more visible in retrospect. What I learned at Georgia Tech didn't just help me ask someone out, it set the foundation for everything that followed, including my eventual career change to clinical social work with a strong focus on applying psychology to helping others. Sometimes the most profound transformations happens so gradually. We don't realize how far we've traveled until we look back. Assaulted. It was 1988. Carrie had just turned 19 that February. She had graduated from high school in Florida in May 1987 after our family had moved 1,300 miles south from Southington, Connecticut, when Dad lost his job at Combustion Engineering. That fall, she enrolled in community college in Hobe Sound. One night she called me crying, telling me both our parents had assaulted her. Afterward, she and a friend agreed, next time we'll have to call the police. I thought about calling the police myself. What had her friend witnessed? This wasn't about Child Protective Services, the kind of reports that as minors might have led to parenting classes or anger management training. This was about criminal assault charges against one's parents. That is rare, extreme, and you don't talk about next time without a before. Carrie and I both knew this was not new. It was part of a pattern. I wasn't shocked. I was disturbed, but not surprised. Soon after, she packed up and traveled 1,300 miles back north to Connecticut. She had no job waiting, no career plan, no invitation, only the need to get out, to return to someplace familiar. A 19-year-old woman driving alone that far because home wasn't safe. That fact stands on its own. I can't ask Carrie now to confirm the details. Later she would say she had exaggerated, reshaping her memory to fit a story that sounded almost idyllic. But back then, we both knew the reality, the dates, the moves, her birthday, her graduation, the community college, the return trip north, all of these hold. What I didn't realize at the time was that, if anything, I may have failed to grasp how bad it was. I knew the pattern. I knew the words. I knew the sound of her voice. But maybe I still understated it. That's the nature of developmental trauma, what I later came to know as complex PTSD. Abuse so repeated, so woven into daily life, that even when you name it, you don't quite see the full weight of it. During the next year, 1989, my senior year, this event faded from memory. I thought it was understood with my parents that I wouldn't work as an engineer. I thought they understood that the shy person who had entered Georgia Tech would need to explore various paths to enter an entirely new field. A full year allowed me to forget how toxic and unsafe living with my parents would be. For me, it would only ever be emotionally unsafe.